She forged my signature, and then smiled as she served me dinner. That was the moment I knew. But what gutted me wasn't just the forged loan in my company's name. It was that Claire, my wife, had already sent copies of my most private contracts to her high school ex, who now runs my biggest rival firm. While I sat across the table thinking we were partners, she was dismantling everything I built. But before her father died, he grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Run from my daughter before she takes everything." He was too late to save himself. But not me. I don't burn bridges. I blueprint their collapse. And hers starts tonight. My name is Evan Lawson, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning before sunrise, I breathe in tool oil and listen to my work trucks rumble to life outside our modest craftsman home. My wife Claire, who I married 3 years ago, runs our household with the same precision she applies to everything. Maybe too much precision lately. Her father Robert, a weathered man of few words, has always given me those quiet nods that mean more than speeches. I keep every receipt, signature, and ledger filed in my workshop safe. A habit that served me well through 20 years of contracting. Claire's been asking more questions about the business accounts, her voice too casual while her eyes stay sharp. The air feels different when money comes up, like pressure dropping before rain. But let me start from the beginning. The hospital corridor seemed endless that afternoon, each step echoing against linoleum that hadn't seen a good buffing in years. You know that antiseptic smell that hits you in places like that? It was stronger in Robert's room, mixing with the mechanical hiss of monitors that had become his constant companions. I'd been sitting there for hours, watching his chest rise and fall, when his eyes suddenly focused on mine with a clarity I hadn't seen in days. His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Those work-weathered fingers of his, still strong despite the illness eating at him, squeezed tight enough to leave marks. "Run from my daughter before she takes everything." The words came out in a rasp, each one fighting its way past his lips. Then his grip went slack, and the final breath left him like wind through autumn leaves. My legs felt wooden as I stumbled into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while I tried to make sense of what I'd just heard. You ever have one of those moments where reality seems to shift sideways? That's how it felt. I kept telling myself that dying words can get tangled up, that grief and medication can blur the truth. Robert had always been straight with me. Why would that change in his final moments? When I got home that evening, Claire was at the dining room table, surrounded by stacks of papers. She looked up, those green eyes of hers clear and focused despite the news about her father. "I'm sorry about Dad," she said, then gestured at the papers. "I've been organizing some of the business receipts while you were gone. I noticed the Morgan Project's invoices seem a bit irregular." Something in her tone made my neck tense. It wasn't a wife asking about her husband's work, but an accountant drilling down on discrepancies. She kept going, naming specific contracts, amounts, dates, details she'd never shown interest in before. I blamed the knot in my stomach on grief and fatigue. Had to be that, right? The way she leaned forward, how her questions came rapid fire like she was ticking boxes on a mental checklist. I filed it all away under stress reactions. People handle loss differently, I told myself. Maybe this was her way of staying busy, keeping her mind off things. But Robert's words kept echoing. So I did what I always do when something doesn't sit right. I decided to check the numbers myself. After Claire went to bed, I spread bank statements across our kitchen table, the one I'd built from reclaimed oak when we first moved in. The house was quiet, except for the refrigerator's steady hum, which seemed to take on a warning tone in the midnight silence. I drew up a list of accounts to verify first thing in the morning. 3 pages of questions, reference numbers, dates to cross-check. My pen circled tomorrow's date twice. The sooner I could confirm everything was clean, the sooner this unease would fade. "It'll all balance out," I whispered to myself. But Robert's warning hung in the air like smoke. The full numbers would tell their story tomorrow. Numbers don't lie. That's what I've always believed. They either add up or they don't. Simple as that. But sitting there in that pool of lamplight, watching shadows play across those columns of figures, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Something right in front of me. I pulled into the office lot just as dawn was breaking. You know that special quiet when you're the first one in? Just the sound of gravel crunching under your boots, and maybe a few early birds getting the jump on the day. The security light clicked off as I reached the front door, like it was passing the watch over to me. The office still held that lingering smell of yesterday's coffee and sawdust. Something oddly comforting about that mix. I'd installed those filing cabinets myself, solid oak monsters that'd probably outlast the building. My keys jingled as I found the right one. Muscle memory taking me straight to the lending drawer. Have you ever had that moment where your fingers know something's wrong before your brain catches up? The folder felt thicker than it should have been. New papers sat right on top, crisp and official looking, with that fresh copy smell still clinging to them. And there it was, clear as day. A loan application with Claire's name typed neatly next to my company's header. My coffee went cold on the desk while I flipped through those pages. Terms and conditions jumped out at me, the kind that could squeeze a business dry if the timing went wrong. Repayment schedules that'd strangle our cash flow. Security agreements that put way too much on the line. My hands started shaking when I saw the credit limits. This wasn't just dipping a toe in the water. This was diving into the deep end with concrete shoes. The drive home felt like it took hours, that folder riding shotgun like an unwanted passenger. I kept glancing at it, half expecting it to disappear or change somehow. The morning sun hit those papers through the windshield, making the letterhead gleam like a warning sign. I waited until dinner. Figured breaking bread might keep things civil. My mama taught me that. I set that folder between our plates, right next to the meatloaf Claire had made. Care to explain this? I kept my voice steady, the way you do when you're handling nitro. Claire looked at that folder like it was a menu at a restaurant she'd been to 100 times. Then she did this thing with her head, just a slight tilt, the way a bird looks at something curious. Her smile was thin as paper when she said, "It's just business, honey. Streamlining access makes everything more efficient." Efficient? The word tasted wrong. I pulled out the signature pages, laid them next to her plate. These terms, these payment schedules, I never agreed to any of this. Never gave authority for it either. Something shifted in her eyes then, like storm clouds moving in. "Oh, Evan." She said my name like she was talking to a kid who didn't understand basic math. "You've got such a builder's brain, always focused on lumber and nails. Sometimes paperwork needs a different touch." That comment about my builder's brain hit harder than she probably meant it to. I've spent 20 years building this business, learning every detail from the ground up. While she talked, I went back through the application, really studying it this time. Found references to accounts I'd never even heard of, much less opened. My throat went dry as I realized just how deep this went. These weren't just new loans, they were obligations that could sink us if they went sideways. The signature block at the bottom caught my eye. Something about it looked off. You know how you can stare at your own signature so long it starts looking strange? This was different. The strokes weren't quite right. The flow wasn't natural. My stomach lurched as I realized what I was looking at. Someone had tried to copy my handwriting, but they'd missed the little tells. The way I looped my L's, the slight upward tilt at the end. I sat there, dinner forgotten, staring at that signature that wasn't mine but was meant to be. The nausea hit me like a wave, and suddenly the room felt too warm, too small. 20 years of honest work, every contract signed in good faith, every deal sealed with a handshake and backed up with clean paperwork. And now this. That afternoon, a knock at the office door made me jump. Karen from reception held up a certified envelope like it might bite. "Needs your signature, Mr. Lawson." Her face told me she knew something was off. After 15 years, she could read trouble like a weather map. You ever get that feeling where your gut knows what's in an envelope before you open it? The paper was thick, expensive, law firm letterhead at the top, the kind that charges by the breath. I had to read it twice because my brain refused to process it the first time. Words like fraudulent activity and signature irregularities jumped off the page. But what really got me was that smooth, professional tone asking for a prompt discussion to resolve these concerns. I pulled out my contract binder, the one I've kept since day one. Every major deal, every significant signature, all carefully filed away. Call it paranoid, but in construction, you learn quick that good records beat good memories every time. "Let's see what we've got here," I muttered, laying out 3 contracts from the past year next to the questioned signature. Right away something felt wrong. You know how your signature becomes like muscle memory? There's a rhythm to it, a natural flow that comes from years of signing your name the same way. These new ones, they were too perfect, like someone trying too hard to get it right. From the hallway came the soft clink of cutlery. Claire putting away the dishes, humming some tune I couldn't place. The sound hit me different now, like music in a horror movie right before something jumps out. I studied those signatures closer, using my desk lamp to catch the shadows. My real ones had these natural pressure points where I bear down harder, especially on the L in Lawson. But these others, the loops were too tight, angles too precise. Someone had traced my signature and they'd done it carefully enough that only I would notice the difference. Through the wall, I could hear Claire moving around, keys jingling as she sorted through her purse. The sound made my chest tight. Every business instinct screamed to confront this head-on. Demand answers right now. But 20 years of handling delicate negotiations taught me something. Sometimes you need to play it slower than your anger wants. I grabbed a legal pad and started making notes. First up, bank records. Had to know exactly what accounts these loans were tied to. Then document custody. Who had access to what, and when. Most important, protecting our payroll reserves. 30 families depended on those checks clearing every Friday. The letter felt like it was burning a hole in my jacket pocket as I folded it away. Had a taste like pennies in my mouth. You know that metallic tang you get when adrenaline hits? I forced my face into something neutral, the same expression I use when dealing with difficult clients. The front door latch clicked, and Claire's keys rattled in that familiar way. I could hear her heels on the hardwood. Steady, confident steps heading my way. Just yesterday, that sound meant home and comfort. Now it made my hands want to shake. Drawing in a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and turned toward the doorway. Had my questions lined up neat and careful in my head. Who suggested these loan changes? When exactly did this process start? Simple stuff that wouldn't show my hand. The kind of questions that might let the truth slip out sideways. Would you believe I actually caught myself hoping there was some explanation that would make sense of all this? That's the thing about trust. It dies hard, even when the evidence is staring you in the face. Claire set the rosemary chicken down with that precise little twist she always used, like she was plating at a 5-star restaurant instead of our oak dining table. The lemon scent cut through everything else, sharp and clean. Too clean, maybe, like how bleach covers other smells. You know those moments when something familiar suddenly feels strange? That's what hit me watching her glide around the table, topping off wine glasses, chattering about her day at the office. Everything looked the same. Her careful movements, that quick smile. But now I saw the calculation behind it all. Each gesture measured, each laugh timed just right. The Morton project's moving along nicely, she said, cutting into her chicken. Sarah mentioned the preliminary budgets looked solid. Her smile flashed across the table, landing like a judge's gavel. Final. Decisive. Thing was, Sarah shouldn't have known anything about those budgets. That information wasn't public yet. I kept my face neutral, the way I do when a client tries sneaking changes into a contract. Speaking of paperwork, I said, keeping my voice casual as summer breeze. Been meaning to ask about those administrative access changes you mentioned, just trying to keep our housekeeping straight. Claire's shoulder lifted in this elegant little shrug. Oh, that's all settled already. Nothing to worry about. She reached for her wine glass, steering the conversation toward weekend plans, like she was changing lanes on the highway. My fork scraped against the plate, and I realized something that turned my stomach worse than any spoiled food could. I might be sharing a bed with my enemy. Right there. Watching her dab her lips with a napkin, everything shifted. Every casual touch, every late-night discussion about the business. They all look different now, like shadows changing shape when you hold the light at a new angle. The lawyer's letter felt heavy in my pocket as I cleared the dishes. Claire hummed in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with that same precise care she did everything else. I needed air. Gonna catch some fresh air, I called out, already heading for the porch. The night air hit my face like a wake-up slap, and I let it numb my cheeks while my mind raced. Robert's face kept floating up in my thoughts. Not the hospital version, but how he used to look watching me work. Those quiet nods when I'd explain how we were handling a tough project. Or the way his eyes would track every detail during site visits. He'd been testing me, I realized now, measuring me against something he knew was coming. Then a name surfaced in my memory. Jack. Robert's old foreman, a straight shooter with hands like steel cable and a loyalty you couldn't shake if you tried. Jack had been there through everything. Robert's best years and worst decisions. If anyone knew what Robert had seen coming, it'd be Jack. Decision made, I headed for the garage. My filing box was where it always sat, categorized and cross-referenced, because in construction, paper trails matter more than handshakes. I grabbed everything related to the loan applications, made copies, and started building a timeline on a legal pad. Dates, signatures, account changes, all of it laid out clean as a blueprint. The truck's seat creaked as I slid the box underneath. Had to be careful here. Claire had a habit of tidying things in my office when I wasn't around. Out here, though, she never touched my work truck. Called it too dirty for her taste, which right now played right into my hands. Back inside, I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., early enough to catch Jack before he headed to his current job site, late enough that Claire wouldn't think twice about me leaving at my usual time. Lying there in the dark, listening to Claire's steady breathing beside me, Robert's words kept echoing. "Run from my daughter before she takes everything." The bedroom's digital clock blinked its way toward dawn, each red flash like a countdown I couldn't stop. Dawn was just cracking the horizon when I pulled into Jack's place, my tires crunching over gravel that had seen decades of work trucks come and go. The air carried that mix of morning diesel and dew that always reminded me of job sites firing up for the day. You know that smell? Pure possibility before problems start piling up. Jack's shop sat off to the side of his house, one of those old metal buildings that had probably started life as a barn. Light already spilled from under the roll-up door. That was Jack for you. Always first up, last down. Same as when he'd worked for Robert. I killed the engine and grabbed my files. The lawyer's letter seemed to burn right through the manila folder, like it knew what was coming. Have you ever carried something that felt heavier than it should? That's what those papers felt like. The shop door was open enough to duck under, and the familiar punch of coffee and sawdust hit me straight away. Jack was at his workbench, steel thermos at his elbow, looking exactly like he had when I'd first met him 15 years back. Same canvas work shirt, same calculated way of sizing up whatever was in front of him. "Morning, Evan," he said, not looking up from whatever he was measuring. "Coffee's fresh if you need it." "Thanks, Jack. But I need something stronger than coffee right now." That got his attention. Jack had this way of narrowing his eyes that reminded me so much of Robert, like he could see right through to the problem before you even explained it. I laid out everything. Robert's warning, Claire's probing, the loan application, and finally, that lawyer's letter. Jack read it twice, his expression getting harder with each pass. When he set it down, his face had that same look Robert would get when he spotted a support beam that wasn't quite plumb. "Show me everything," he said, clearing space on his workbench. That bench had seen better days, scarred from decades of projects, stained with coffee rings and marked with measurements that probably dated back to when Reagan was president. I spread it all out. Bank statements, vendor logs, lending terms. Jack's pencil started moving, tapping here and there, tracing dates and initials like he was following a wiring diagram. Then he stopped cold on one clause, his pencil point actually tearing the paper a bit. "Here's your timer," he said, voice grim as winter. "Balloon payment. 3 weeks from today." He tapped the clause again. "Miss it, and they can seize everything. Equipment, accounts, contracts. The whole damn works." My mouth went desert dry. The calendar on Jack's wall suddenly looked like a countdown clock, each day marking one step closer to demolition. 21 days. 3 weeks to stop a wrecking ball I hadn't even known was swinging. But Jack was already moving, grabbing a fresh sheet of paper. "Windows tight," he said, starting to write. "But not impossible. Not if we work this smart." His pencil kept moving, marking down action items like he was drafting a build schedule. For a second there, watching him work, I felt this flicker of relief. Like maybe this was just another project challenge, something we could solve with enough planning and elbow grease. Then, that balloon payment date caught my eye again, and that hope sputtered like a bad generator. Jack laid out his plan, straight and clean as a chalk line. "We divide and conquer," he said. "I'll dig into the metadata, track access history, see who touched what and when. You lock down payroll and secure those active contracts." He pushed the timeline across the bench. "Every hour counts now, Evan." I folded the paper, tucked it in my shirt pocket, right over my heart. The shop's wall clock ticked away, each second eating into our 21 days. My whole business, hell, my whole life, was balanced like a house of cards, and that balloon payment was looking more and more like a tornado heading straight for it. Ever watched dominoes fall? Not the fun kind where kids set them up in patterns, but the kind where each tile knocks down something bigger than itself? That's what the next few hours felt like, sitting there in Jack's shop while the morning light crept across those papers. We started with the access logs. Boring stuff, really. Just timestamps and user IDs, the kind of thing nobody pays attention to until something goes wrong. But Jack, he had this way of laying them out that made patterns jump right off the page. "Look here," he said, highlighting entries with a yellow marker. "Every major edit to the billing system lines up perfect with Claire's logins." His marker kept moving, drawing connections I wished I couldn't see. Not just once or twice. Every single time. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? That's what hit me as Jack overlaid delivery slips with email timestamps. The coincidences were too neat, too regular. like watching someone roll 7 straight sevens at dice. At some point, you know it's not luck anymore. Claire pulls up invoice A, Jack muttered, drawing another arrow. And within hours, there's a problem with payment B that benefits. His pencil traced a path that always ended at the same place. Our biggest competitor. My chest got tight, like someone was cranking down a vice. I've worked construction long enough to know when something's engineered versus when it just happens. This was engineered, all right. Precision built to bleed my company dry. Got those bid histories? Jack asked, not looking up from his arrows and circles. I pulled the archive box closer, started laying out estimates from the last 6 months. The coffee in my gut had gone cold and sour. Side by side, our bids and the competitors told a story I didn't want to read. There, Jack pointed, his finger landing on a line about specialty fixtures. That's your phrasing, isn't it? The bit about custom milled crown with period-accurate details? It was. Word for word, right down to the comma placement. And there it was in the competitor's bid, submitted just hours after our internal draft. I'd written that description myself, spent 20 minutes getting the wording just right to justify the premium pricing. Could be coincidence, I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Jack just looked at me. That same steady gaze Robert used to have. Once is coincidence. Twice is concerning. He flipped through more pages. This is 17 times in 4 months. I've tasted a lot of bitter things in my life. Construction dust, cheap coffee, pride when a bid goes south. But nothing quite matched the taste in my mouth right then. Betrayal has its own flavor, and it sticks to your tongue like old copper. My pen scratched across the legal pad as I wrote what we both knew. Claire, information leak. Simple words for something that felt like a knife in my gut. Jack waited, quiet as a foundation settling. Then he reached into his filing cabinet and pulled out one more folder. Dropped it on the bench between us like he was handling live ammunition. You haven't asked the big question yet, he said softly. About who owns that competing outfit. I stared at that folder. Didn't want to touch it. But some questions burn until you answer them. And this one was already smoking. Who? I managed, though my throat felt like I'd swallowed concrete mix. Jack's eyes held mine, steady as a plumb line. The folder sat there between us, and all those patterns, the logs, the timestamps, the leaked phrases, seemed to point at it like arrows to a bullseye. Go ahead, Jack said. You need to see it for yourself. My hand didn't feel like my own as I reached for that folder. The shop had gone quiet, except for the soft tick of Jack's wall clock counting down our 21 days, and the sound of my own breath, rough as sawdust in my throat. I opened that folder, and Jack's silence felt heavier than a concrete pour. Mike Preston, Jack said, his voice low and measured. Ring any bells? The name hit me like a misplaced step on a scaffold. Mike Preston, Claire's high school sweetheart, the one Robert couldn't stand. I remembered Robert's face, turning to granite whenever Preston Construction came up in conversation. Now, I knew why. Son of a... The words died in my throat. All those leaked bids, the systematic bleeding of my company. It wasn't just business rivalry. It was personal, a setup years in the making. With Claire playing both sides like a card sharp, my mind raced back through months of praise I'd given Claire for her help with the business. Great teamwork, hun, I'd say, while she funneled our data straight to Mike. The shame burned hot in my chest, climbing up my neck like a fever. I gripped the folder so tight my knuckles went white. How long? I asked Jack. Preston Construction registered 18 months ago. Jack's eyes had that same protective look Robert's used to get. Right after Claire started asking to help with the books. The drive home was a blur. My hands kept slipping on the steering wheel, and every red light felt like an eternity. The folder rode shotgun like an armed bomb. You ever notice how the familiar turns strange when your world shifts? My own street looked different. My house a stranger's place. Claire was in the kitchen when I walked in, sorting mail like any normal evening. The scene was so ordinary it made my teeth hurt. We need to talk, I said, dropping the folder on the counter. About Mike Preston. She didn't flinch, didn't even look up right away. When she did, her eyes were cool as polished stone. Oh? Cut the act, Claire. I know about the leaks, the coincidental bid matches, the whole damn scheme. She glanced at the calendar on the wall, the one marking our 3-week countdown, then back to me. Her smile was different now, sharp-edged. And what exactly do you think you can do about it? A full audit will... Fight this, she cut in, voice precise as a laser level, and you lose everything. The mortgage folder sat fat and smug on the counter beside us. Beyond the kitchen window, I could see my company trucks lined up in the driveway. Each one represented a job, a commitment, a family depending on their next paycheck. They looked like dominoes now, just waiting for the first push. "That's your play?" I asked. "Threaten me with a clock?" "It's not a threat, Evan. It's math." She tapped the calendar. 3 weeks. The balloon payment comes due, and then she shrugged, letting the silence fill in the rest. "A clean audit decides this," I said. "Not threats." Something in her eyes changed then, hardened like cement setting. The kitchen felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. I stepped outside, letting the screen door bang behind me. The night air was just cool enough to fog my breath, and I could hear the neighbors' wind chimes, counting time like pocket change. Standing there on my own porch, gripping the railing like it might save me, I felt that countdown settle into my pulse. 21 days, 504 hours, each one ticking away value, accumulating interest, whispering ugly equations about compound rates and asset seizures. You know what keeps a man up at night? Not the big things, not earthquakes or lightning strikes. It's the small numbers that murder. Sleep, interest rates, calendar pages, the precise dollar amount that separates dignity from disaster. I stared at my house, my collateral according to those loan papers, and wondered how a man measures pride against principle. The porch light caught the company logo on my truck's door, and I remembered painting that myself way back when. Funny how something you built with your own hands can become a weapon pointed at your heart. Sleep didn't come that night. How could it? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those dominoes, my trucks, my contracts, my crew's livelihoods, all lined up neat and straight, just waiting for Claire's finger to tip the first one over. I woke up feeling hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just enough shell to keep breathing. You know that moment when giving up feels like the only sane choice? That was me, staring at the ceiling, while first light crept across it. The money would vanish either way, fight or fold. At least surrendering would stop this constant panic, this acid burn in my gut every time I thought about the calendar. But man, the cost to your backbone, that's the kind of debt that compounds forever. My phone buzzed. Jack's name lit up the screen, and it wasn't even sunrise yet. "You awake?" he asked, though we both knew the answer. "Been counting ceiling, tiles." Robert didn't whisper to a coward, son. Jack's voice had that steady, worksite certainty I needed. "He saw something in you worth warning." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, grabbed the timeline from my nightstand and spread it across my lap. 20 days left, but maybe... "We fight smart," I said. Not loud. "Now you're thinking." I could hear Jack shifting papers on his end. "Simple trap, legal, clean, by the book. Just like you always run things." The plan came together over coffee, built on rules and receipts instead of revenge. We'd create decoy contracts, each one tagged with invisible watermarks tied to specific recipients, like those old spy movies where they'd give different versions of a secret to flush out the leak. "Digital fingerprints," Jack explained. "Every document tells us exactly where it went." I spent that afternoon in my office, preparing the controlled copies. Had to document everything: creation times, distribution logs, the works. You'd be amazed how much paperwork it takes to set a proper trap. "Make duplicates," Jack insisted when he came by to review our checklist. "Everything in the fireproof safe, no loose ends." I looked at the stack of contracts, each one a silent witness just waiting to testify. "She'll never see the watermarks? Not unless she knows where to look. And trust me," Jack tapped the safe door as it clicked shut, "she won't look." I saved the files to the shared drive Claire had been so keen on accessing lately. Gave the folders some mundane title about Q3 projections. Nothing that screamed bait to anyone hunting secrets. The sun was already sliding toward the horizon when I finally stood up from my desk. Through my office window, I watched the sky bruise into twilight, all purple and gold at the edges. Sometimes the most important moments come wrapped in ordinary packaging. Where that morning's dread had lived, something harder took root. Not anger. I was past that. This was resolve, cold and clean as winter air. I locked up, double-checking everything out of habit. The night settled around me as I walked to my truck, crickets starting their evening shift. Behind me, the bait sat quiet in its digital cage, waiting. Remember what I said about familiar things turning strange? Standing there in my own parking lot, everything felt different. But this time, the difference had teeth, and they weren't pointed at me anymore. You can only push a builder so far before he starts laying foundation for something you never saw coming. I pulled into the office lot while stars still peppered the sky. Funny how the darkest hours can feel like your clearest thinking time. You ever notice that? How problems sort themselves out better before the world wakes up. The security light clicked on as I approached the door, making my shadow stretch long across the pavement. Inside, everything felt different, like walking through your own house when you know someone's been going through your drawers. The air conditioner hummed to life, and I settled into my chair, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Time to check our digital tripwires. The system logs loaded up, and there it was, plain as day in black and white. Claire's login credentials had accessed every single one of those marked contracts. Not just viewed them, mind you, but downloaded them too. Each file told its own story through the watermarks we'd embedded. "Let's see where you sent them," I muttered, pulling up the tracking data. My screen filled with a web of connections, each one documented with timestamps and routing information. The documents had bounced through a couple of email servers before landing exactly where we figured they would. In the inbox of Claire's old flame, now my biggest competitor. You know what bothers you most in moments like these? It's not even the betrayal anymore. It's how methodical it was. How someone could sit across the dinner table from you, share your coffee in the morning, and orchestrate your ruin with the same casual efficiency they'd use to plan a grocery list. I started taking screenshots, making sure each one captured the full chain of evidence. The printer whirred to life, spitting out page after page of proof. Each sheet felt heavy in my hands, like they were made of something denser than paper. The morning light was just starting to creep through my office blinds when Jack's truck rumbled into the lot. He came in carrying 2 cups of coffee, the good stuff from that place downtown, not the break room sludge. "Show me," was all he said, setting 1 cup by my keyboard. I spread the evidence across my desk, while Jack leaned in, studying each page with the same careful attention he'd give to checking load-bearing joints on a build. When he finished, he gave me that single, firm nod, exactly the way Robert used to when he'd inspect my work and find it true to level. Something settled in my chest then. Not peace exactly, but that solid feeling you get when you've built something right. When every joint is square, every nail where it should be. "Hand me those folders," I said, reaching for my briefcase. We assembled 2 packets, one for the bank, one for the state licensing board. I lined up every page corner to corner, making sure the sequence told the story clean and clear. No editorial comments needed. The facts spoke loud enough. "Take your time," Jack advised as I started on the cover letter. "Let the evidence do the heavy lifting." He was right. I kept it simple. Enclosed, please find documentation regarding unauthorized access and distribution of proprietary contracts. The wall clock ticked toward morning while I double-checked submission deadlines and set alarms on my phone. Everything had to land on the right desks at the right time. The scratch of tires on gravel outside made me look up. Through my office window, I watched a car pull into the lot. Too early for regular staff. Must be someone else who couldn't sleep. I slipped the finished packets into my briefcase, each one sealed and labeled. The leather felt cool against my palm as I clicked the latches shut. "Tomorrow," I whispered, more to myself than to Jack. "Tomorrow's got to be the turn." The words hung in the air between us, as solid as steel beam, and just as heavy with purpose. I timed it perfectly. Walked through those heavy bank doors, right as Sandra, the head teller, was flipping the closed sign to open. The lobby had that early morning emptiness, just fluorescent lights humming and a copier chunking away somewhere in the back offices. Funny how some sounds stick with you. That buzz-thump rhythm reminded me of my first construction loan, back when every decimal point made my hands shake. Know what's different when you're delivering bad news versus asking for money? The chairs feel harder, and the air conditioning hits colder. "Mr. Lawson?" The banking officer, Kevin Mitchell, according to his nameplate, looked up from his computer. "What brings you in so early?" I settled into the chair across from his desk, briefcase balanced on my knee. "We need to discuss some irregularities with my business accounts." Amazing how steady your voice can get when you've rehearsed something 100 times in your head. You ever notice how some moments feel like they're happening in slow motion? I could see every micro-expression cross Kevin's face as I laid out that packet. Confusion, concern, then that careful banker's neutral mask sliding into place. "Let me walk you through this timeline," I said, opening to the first tab. "These loan modifications were submitted without my authorization." I pointed to Claire's digital fingerprints all over the paperwork. "Here's where you'll find multiple signature discrepancies." Kevin leaned forward, reading glasses perched on his nose. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Lawson. That's why I brought proof." I flipped to the next section. "These are decoy contracts we created, each with unique watermarks. And these, I tapped the server logs. Show exactly where they went and who accessed them. The copier kept thumping away in the background while Kevin studied each page. My watch felt heavy on my wrist, ticking down those last hours of our 3-week deadline. You understand this balloon payment comes due today, Kevin said, looking up. That's exactly why I'm here now. I kept my tone as level as a fresh-poured foundation. I need this evidence appended to the loan file, with a formal note that the terms are under dispute. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while Kevin made a call to their legal department. I'd worked too long in this business not to know procedure matters as much as proof. You want to know the hardest part? Sitting still. Not drumming my fingers or checking my watch every 30 seconds. Just watching Kevin stamp those receipt pages with the same methodical precision I used to measure lumber. I'll place this in our secure processing queue immediately, he said, sliding the packet into a designated tray marked Priority. Would you like a copy of the stamped cover sheet? Please. My voice stayed measured, like I was discussing a routine inspection rather than dropping a bombshell that would reshape my whole world. Walking out those bank doors felt like stepping out of a pressure chamber. The morning sun hit sharp and clean, and my briefcase swung lighter at my side. Checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. Perfect timing for stop number 2. The state licensing board building stood just 6 blocks away. Same walk I'd made hundreds of times for permits and certifications, but today's path felt different. Each step had weight to it, like I was laying down foundation blocks instead of just covering ground. I used the walk to run through my points again. Same facts, same sequence, same evidence, just like hanging identical cabinets in a row. The truth doesn't need different angles. It just needs to be shown in the same clean lines every time. The board's building looked exactly like you'd expect. All glass and concrete, trying its best to look important without looking expensive. I reached for that brass door handle, feeling the metal warm from the morning sun. Behind that door waited another room full of cold chairs and consequences that would burn hot enough to melt steel. But you know what? I was ready. When you've got truth squared up in your corner, even the hardest rooms get easier to walk into. The licensing board's lobby hadn't changed since my first contractor application 20 years ago. Same institutional green walls, same plastic plants trying their best to look alive. Even the sign-in sheet looked identical, though my hand was steadier now than it had been back then. You know that feeling, when you're about to change everything? Your mouth goes a little dry and time seems to stretch like taffy. That's how it felt watching the clerk type my information into their system. Please have a seat, Mr. Lawson. She gestured to a row of chairs beneath a rattling air vent. Someone will be with you shortly. I arranged the second packet on my lap, making sure every page lined up perfect. Funny how habits stick. I could hear my old mentor's voice. Clean papers mean clean business, kid. Mr. Lawson? A different clerk called my name. Younger this time, with the kind of serious expression that comes from taking rules personally. Please follow me. The conference room they led me to was small but official, with a state seal on one wall and a camera in the corner. 2 people waited inside, a senior clerk and what looked like a supervisor. Please walk us through your submission, the supervisor said, settling into her chair. I opened the packet and laid out our tracking system first. Each contract contained a unique watermark, visible only under specific conditions. I pulled out the UV light we'd used. These marks let us trace exactly where documents went and who accessed them. The senior clerk leaned forward. And you maintained strict chain of custody? Yes, ma'am. I showed them our logs, time-stamped and initialed. Every access point was monitored and recorded. The trail leads directly from our secure server to unauthorized parties. Have you ever explained something complicated while trying not to let anger creep into your voice? It's like walking a tightrope. I kept my tone steady as I detailed how the forged authority had put everything at risk. Payroll for 35 families, active projects for clients who trusted us, the public's faith in licensed contractors. These signature comparisons, the supervisor said, spreading out several pages, they show clear discrepancies. I nodded. The pressure points and stroke patterns don't match my authorized signatures. We've included certified copies for verification. They spent the next 20 minutes going through every document, every log entry, every piece of evidence we'd gathered. I let the papers do the talking. Truth doesn't need much decoration. Finally, the supervisor looked up. We'll need to review this immediately with our compliance team. She handed me a time-stamped acknowledgement. Please check back at noon for our preliminary determinations regarding filings and responsible parties. Outside, the morning air had warmed up. I pulled out my phone and called Jack. Both submissions are logged, I told him. Banks got their packet, and the board's reviewing theirs now. Clean and by the book. Jack said. Robert would have approved. I looked up at the courthouse clock across the square. 10:15. The clouds were burning off, leaving that kind of clear sky that makes you feel like everything's visible for miles. Back at the yard, I knew our trucks were sitting idle. 35 drivers and crew leads waiting to hear if they'd be rolling out to job sites tomorrow or looking for new work. The weight of those livelihoods settled on my shoulders like a load of wet concrete. I pulled out the acknowledgement slip and folded it carefully into my wallet. Pacing wouldn't make noon come any faster. Instead, I found a bench outside the board's doors and settled in to wait. A cardinal landed on the railing nearby. Bright red against all that government gray. Reminded me of something Robert used to say about patience. A man who can't sit still with his truth probably isn't holding enough of it. So I sat, watching that courthouse clock tick toward noon, holding enough truth to fill a foundation. The licensing board's lobby was packed at noon. I squeezed past contractors in work boots and found a spot near the bulletin board where they post determinations. My palms were damp. Funny how 25 years of building things doesn't prepare you for moments like this. Afternoon determinations are posted, a clerk announced, pushing through with a stack of papers. Have you ever noticed how time stretches when you're watching someone pin papers to a board? Each staple clicked like a hammer strike. I held back, letting others crowd forward first. Sometimes waiting those extra seconds helps steady your hands. When I finally stepped up, the text swam for a moment before snapping into focus. The bank's response came first. All fraudulent obligations were officially reassigned solely to Claire. My company, my people's livelihoods, were released from that poisoned loan. The weight that lifted from my chest nearly took my knees with it. The licensing board's decision sat right below. I had to read it twice, not because it was unclear, but because seeing justice in black and white hits different than just hoping for it. Claire's name was stripped from every business filing in our region. The disciplinary notice spelled it out in government language that couldn't be twisted. Documented breaches, unauthorized access, conflict of interest. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. Jack needed to hear this first. He'd earned that right. I stepped outside where the afternoon sun hit like a spotlight and dialed his number. Jack, I said when he picked up. It's done. Clean sweep. Company's clear. Take a breath, Evan, he said quietly. Take a real breath until it feels like air again. I did. The courthouse bell struck once, and for the first time in weeks, its tone didn't sound like a warning. The crews? Jack asked. Heading to the yard now. Time to get those trucks painted. Red? I could hear his smile. Robert's favorite shade. I drove back to the yard with the windows down. You know that feeling when a storm passes? When the air's so clean it almost hurts to breathe? That's what victory tastes like. The paint crew was waiting. We'd had to postpone this job when the legal mess started. Now it felt right to finish it. I walked over to where they had the samples ready. Bold red, I told them, pointing to the shade that matched our old logo. Company name centered. No additions, no footnotes. While they worked, I headed inside to sign payroll. Every name on that list represented a family that had stuck with us through the chaos. They deserved better than to wonder about their next check. The phone started ringing, clients wanting updates. I told them straight, schedule holds, crews roll tomorrow. Quality stays exactly where it's been for 25 years. Trust rebuilds one conversation at a time. Around 4, the first truck rolled out of the paint bay, red as sunrise. The name, my name, stood out clean and clear against that fresh coat. No partner listed, no fancy additions. Just the simple truth of who we were and what we did. I walked to the bay door as engines started rumbling to life. One by one, our fleet pulled into formation. The late afternoon light caught that paint job just right, making each truck look like it was carved from something solid and permanent. Standing there, watching them line up, I thought about what survived and what didn't. A marriage died, sure, but honor lived. Trust between men who work hard and keep their word. That lived too. The lead truck pulled out first, that bold red paint catching the sun like a promise kept. The rest followed, a line of pride rolling back onto jobs that needed doing. I watched until the last tail light disappeared, then said what Robert would have said if he'd been standing there. A man's honor is his true inheritance.